Hello all. It is just about 3:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to your Friday afternoon IP lesson. Glad to have all of you with us today. This is IP, OA, and DAMs, oh my. So if you were looking for another session, now's your chance to exit stage right. I'm Ann Young. I'm the manager of rights and reproductions at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. I am joined today by two wonderful colleagues. I have Deborah Wythe, the head of digital collections and services at the Brooklyn Museum, and John French, the director of visual resources at the Yale University Art Gallery.
Hi, good afternoon. We're going to look today at, or I'm going to look today at the integrated systems that we've developed at the Brooklyn Museum over the last 6 or so years. Our goals have been to gain control of our intellectual property rights for the works in the collection, to disseminate information about using images among staff via our digital asset and collections management systems, and to release images and rights information to the public via our website and Wikimedia Commons. We're going to look at open access. And I would say we're semi-open access, so I'm going to look at it from a point of view of an institution that is still thinking. We'll talk about what it means to our institution, some different flavors of open access, and how institutional culture and goals can affect what flavor you choose. And also, I have some pitfalls and contradictions that I see with the way open access is sort of happening around the museum community. So I'm going to look at those. So I'm going to start with a quick survey just to set the stage. How many people here have a collections management system? Okay, just about everybody. Digital asset management system? Fewer. A content management system for adding extra web content if you need it, even fewer. And then an IP program or a copyright clearance program. Ooh, that's actually better than I expected. So that's heartwarming. So anyway, in reality, in order to do it really well, you need all 4 of those things in place. So this is sort of setting the stage for what we're going to be looking at today. I put in my title CMS times 2 because CMS means content management system or collections management system. And being a museum person, I always have fun finding images. So this is a Winslow Homer themed presentation now that we've gotten past our survey. So a really, really quick pass over setting up an IP program. You need to place IP in the institutional structure, which of course is a problem because quite often there's nobody responsible for it. And I think in the case of the 3 of us, we probably just took that hat and put it on. It needed to be done, so we did it. One of the things you need to do is manage how your institutional museum council is involved, if you even have one, because if you leave it in their hands, it will stall because they will be looking at every detail. Most important thing, creating a non-exclusive license and defining procedures. The next big step is take a look at your collection, survey it, set priorities for what you want to do and what you can do. We looked at really, really broad rights categories in terms of our entire collection. We chose low-hanging fruit. We all have them. Our Egyptian collection probably has 0 IP issues. It's all in the public domain, and they're all our photographs for the most part. So those kind of things can help your program get off to a flying start. You may have to make some decisions and compromises that are going to affect you down the road. That 1923, the 1923 compromise. We decided that by virtue of being in a museum, works of art had been published. And works of art that were published before 1923 are in the public domain. So we decided that anything created before 1923 and in our collection was in the public domain. And we put it in our system as no known copyright restrictions. The problem with that is you can't look at the other side, which is life plus 70. So because if something is unpublished, it goes into the public domain a certain number of years after the death of the artist. So we're saying it's published, therefore we can't use that cutoff. It's a bit of a conundrum, but those are the kind of compromise you will face. I should say, in connection with that, you need to assess your risk, and it's pretty low in most cases, especially in these older things. These are the broad rights categories that we assigned. This is a report from our TMS collections management system of how we broke down the works in the collection. You can see the biggest one is Creative Commons 3D works, where we've done the photography. We're putting it in the public domain for people to use. We have many with no known copyright restrictions. Okay. When you're setting up structures to track your clearance activities, there are really two separate paths that you need to do. One is for the record in your collections management system, what is the right status of a work of art? And then you also need a system to track the processes for your workflow, for getting those licenses. We do that in Access and Excel, and I'll show you some samples of that later. But I want to really emphasize that your collections management system is where the rights status belongs for the works of art. Your digital asset management system is where the right status of the photograph, the image of the work, belongs, because you can have many images of one work, and those many images might be by you or some other photographer, but the work itself also has a right status. There's that image. So this is one case where the Edward Hopper, we placed it in the public domain. If you took his death date, it would not be. And here's our structures. Once you have information in your CMS, your collections management system, you can leverage that for a lot of purposes. We use the rights and reproductions module in TMS to put all the information, to put it into an object's right type, to put a copyright statement, and to include information on restrictions and permissions. The great thing of having information in collections management is that you can generate other reports, and you can reuse this information. It's not enter it and forget it. So here's a canned query I have for what objects in our collection are protected by copyright. 23,599 right now. And it changes because we're always getting licenses. I can generate an artist list for who is protected by copyright. And our interns who are working on copyright clearance work from a spreadsheet that was generated from that. And it also tells me how many works. So you decide, bang for your buck. Oh, here's an artist that, we have 300 pieces. Let's clear it. We do a lot of film shoots at the museum. The people doing the shoots always want to know the status of the works that are going to be in the background. I finally got a report from our TMS manager where I can generate it by location, and it gives me the right status of every work that's in that gallery. I should say that film shoot people are very, very, very risk averse. So while you may tell them it's no known copyright restrictions, but most likely their lawyer is going to say, "Ooh, I'm worried about that." So, but that's their worry. Our digital asset management system talks to TMS. TMS talks to our DAMs. So information that we put in TMS for the copyright status appears the next day, or once a week. There's a data upgrade from TMS to DAMs. It's once a week because it's a huge database. From DAMs to TMS, it's overnight. So if there's a copyright status in TMS, it appears in the DAMs. The statement is there, and copyright notes are there. These are just some examples of how we track the clearance workflow. This is all done by interns with me overseeing them. We have just a simple access database, but it tracks every step of what they're doing. We have all of these tasks. They're sort of in order, and it allows you to go through and see which ones still need follow-up, which ones are ARS, and we're not going to go any farther until we need to actually really have it and pay them something, whether we've gotten licenses, if there are any problems with it. And I should say that the follow-up happens often over a period of months and sometimes years. So you have to have a handle on where you are with this particular artist when their grandchild calls you up and says, I think I got something from you in the mail, I don't know, last year. What are you doing? So then you need to go in and say, oh yes, you know, we've looked at this, we've talked to you, you know, we want to get a license from you. Once everything is in your DAMs and in your content management or collections management system, you really want to leverage the effort that you've put into it and share it with everybody, not just people in your own institution. All of those 3 databases, collections management, DAMs, content management, feed information to our website. If you want to go play with it, if we've got people with laptops here and Wi-Fi, there's the URL. If you go to collections, you can go into any of the records and see what I'm showing, because I'm not going to do it live. So if you search for a particular object, you're going to see information from Luna, our DAM, which will be the image, a caption, which is something that's so simple that I'm so happy that we did. What we did was we took all of the tombstone data from TMS, talked to our editors, said, how do you format a caption normally? What's sort of a template for a caption? And came up with a format that they liked that had the right order and the right punctuation. And it just basically feeds all that TMS data into it and gives you a canned caption. So that if the curators are working on a project and they need a caption, they can just cut and paste that and then edit it as needed. And that same caption is on the website for any person to copy. And it gives your IP status, it gives the credit for the object. The image information is also coming from the DAM with an image credit. It says Brooklyn Museum photograph here. The stuff in the big square, obviously, that's tombstone, that's all from TMS. And then we have a content database that feeds into the website that includes longer descriptions. We pick up didactic. If a curator writes a didactic, it goes through editorial, and I think it's there's some sort of process where it automatically goes through the editorial process and then ends up in this content database, which I don't manage. So how it gets there, I don't know, but that detailed information shows up on the website. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is that we should all be transparent about rights, because I hate it when I go to somebody's website and I see an image of a work of art and I want to use it for something and it says nothing. So, So we include an approved rights statement from when we have a license, and we also have boilerplate license rights statements when we don't actually already have one. And if you click on that rights statement, the follow-up statements show up. It says we have a non-exclusive license in this case. It also has lawyer talk, that we don't warrant that this is, that you will be able to use this and that that you're responsible to go farther. And then this is the set for no known copyright restrictions, which is a term we took from the Library of Congress. They came up with this term. You're not saying for sure it's in the public domain, but you're pretty sure there aren't any restrictions. So we feel very comfortable with that. Each of these little boxes is, there's kind of a matrix. And when it comes to getting stuff from TMS, the DAMs, and the content management system into the website, I gave instructions to the web designer and said, okay, if it's no known copyright restrictions, take statements A, B, C, and F. If I have a right statement, take B, C, D, and G. So there are all of these approved statements that kind of feed into a specialized view for each of our object rights types in TMS. And for all of them, we put some, if you want to learn more information. And we also say, if you have more information, here's how you contact us because we want to know. And we also are committed to helping people get in touch with the copyright holders. So somebody writes to me and says, oh, you've got a work in your collection by so-and-so. Do you know who's the rights holder? If I have contact information, I send it out. I don't really worry too much about privacy in these days, unless somebody has said specifically, don't share this. This is sort of coming into open access or semi-open access. We have a download button for any image that's in the public domain or is one of our, is no known copyright restrictions, or we have a license. We allow download of up to 1,536 pixels on the wide side, which actually comes because that's size 4 derivative in Luna. And if it's very easy for our web people just to pour that in. There have been discussions and will be discussions for larger size images. We've already upgraded once. When we started out, I think we started at 768, and then we decided that's too small, so we went a little bigger. So that's the segue into open access. How open is your access? What can you provide? And what do people need? There are some issues. One of them is firewall issues. If you're putting large size images, they're going to have to be outside of your firewall, and your web people are going to be more concerned with that overhead. There are budget issues, certainly in my institution. We have a history of, budget line income from rights and reproductions. So there has not been support in my institution for open access because they don't want to lose that line. I mean, it is an ongoing question, though. The question of what do people really need, I think it's coming down to people, for publication, you can get away with an uncompressed JPEG of 3,000 to 4,000 pixels on the long side, unless you're doing a really large publication. And I think we all have this knee jerk that we need a TIFF file for everything we do, and we're on the sort of both sides, because we publish books, and when we send out a request for an image that we want to license for a book, we say that we want a TIFF file, 400 pixels per inch at 9 by 12. So, and mostly we get them, but when we can't get them, the publisher is fine when we give them a large JPEG. So I think we need to start educating ourselves and each other about, well, what is really needed. My biggest concern about open access, and the thing that makes me more and more in support of it, is equality of access. It makes me crazy that we have a process called curatorial gratis. Somebody writes to one of our curators, they need an image, the curator emails me, there's a standard permission letter that the curator sends out, I send them the image, done. Somebody doesn't know a curator, they send in a request to our rights and reproductions page, and we have a lower cost plan for people that are academics or just need it for personal use, but those are the same people. It's just they don't have the connections. And I really think everybody should be on an equal basis. The other thing is we work with Corbis and Bridgman, so we have our images placed with licensing agencies because we can reach a different audience that way. So somebody who doesn't know to go through our own website to get the image is going to pay a lot more to Corbis and we'll get less. So there's a problem there that I think we need to resolve. So that's just sort of opening many questions about open access, which I think John has come close to answering. So we're trying to expand our reach. We're putting our public domain images on Wikimedia Commons. We have almost 10,000 files there. And we actually have a project to we call it wiki seeding. So I have a staff member who works on it, and usually an intern or a volunteer who's looking for articles where we can place our images, even if it's only a gallery, say. But we also add them if they make sense in the images, in the articles. Oops. Do you want me to fly past this? Am I running out of time, Anne, or am I good?
About
okay.
4 or 5 minutes.
Oh, good, good. So one of the things that's really important with having this kind of leveraged, integrated system is for your in-house use. So everybody at the Brooklyn Museum has access to Luna, so they can see all the works in the collection that have images that are not restricted. If they're curatorial, they can see the ones that are restricted as well. So there are 2 tracks. There are ones for the educators, the public info people, the development people where we don't want things that are about to be deaccessioned to go out to the world, but our curators obviously need that. We need to educate people about intellectual property so that they use these images properly. In Luna, do I not have that slide? Lost a slide. In Luna, the rights information from TMS, oh yeah, I saw that earlier. The rights information ends up in Luna. So we need to educate everybody to say, oh, you want to use this image in this brochure that you're going to send out from membership. Make sure that you look in the field that says object rights type, rights statement, restrictions. And if you see anything there that doesn't say we have a license or no known copyright restrictions, call Deborah. It sort of works, but new people come, there's turnover and so forth. So you need gatekeepers. Our editors, periodically I remind them, oh, if you have some captions coming through and you don't see a copyright statement or you just see boilerplate, check in, we need to check rights. And the sort of end person is our designer. If the designer's doing a page and they see a canned boilerplate right statement that says copyright artist or artist estate, they have to know to get in touch. The system permissions, I already mentioned that there are 2 tracks. And leveraging counsel, I think, is really important. Up until about 2 years ago, we didn't even have in-house counsel. Now we do. She's really busy, so she depends on me to handle any question that I feel competent to do, and I only go to her if it's something that I feel like, well, we need some legal advice on this, and it takes forever, so we try to avoid that. And then finally, if you have the time, some of the fun projects you can do is researching your orphan works. So going through the whole process to really see if you can find who the rights holder is, and if you can't, then making the determination that they're orphaned, and you're going to release them to the world, knowing that there's no legal ruling behind it, but that there's very low risk. And my favorite one, I think, is public domaining works. There are a lot of works that if you could do the research to say, you know, this was published, there's no copyright statement on it, you know, the artist is dead this many years, they lived in the US, we have a whole checklist that we go through, that you can put them into the public domain and feel confident that nobody's going to come after you. And I'm thinking licensing agencies, frankly, primarily, and that you can then use those works for museum purposes and put them on your website. So I think we all need to find the time to do a little more of that. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Deb. Now, John French from the Yale University.
All right. Deb and I operate somewhat similarly, not surprisingly. I'm going to focus a little bit more on how we implement open access, because a couple of years ago at MCN, a group of us from Yale talked about Yale going to open access. So in 2011, Yale made the decision across the board for all of its cultural institutions that they would launch open access, making any material, any images free to the public. So we participated in that. We were actually giving images away for free in 2009, but open access of the public domain works came along in 2011 and we did that. So that's where my focus is going to lie, but I am going to touch a little bit on what we had to do on campus to define what open access was. So open access, if it's your own institution, you certainly have to have some meetings, but you're more limited to how you do your business. At Yale, you can imagine there are multiple units, and so we needed to come up with multiple agreements on how we were going to implement this and distribute it. And we built a central website that if you do a simple Google on Yale Open Access, you'll land to this, as well as a list of questions about what is the policy, what does open access mean, how can I use these images? And then on top of that, each individual unit has a similar page that talks more about this is how we do open access where we are. So as Deb mentioned, we use TMS as our collections management system, and we see TMS as the data authority for the object. So that is where all of the rights information for the object is stored, and we're storing it as well in the rights and reproductions screen of that. We typically have two main categories that we use within TMS by default. So when an object, we ran a query against the object when we went with open access, but any new object that comes in that is created prior to 1923 gets a default object rights type of public domain. Anything else by default gets a object rights type of not assigned. And that just allows us to go through and start doing queries later for those not assigned things. Where we know certain artists and we know who the rights holder is, then we can go through, query those, and batch assign information to this. But as a start, this is what happens. On our end, and part of what I'm going to talk about is what these different fields start doing. For us, they start triggering a lot of automatic actions that push through to our DAM system, push out to our website, and push out to Amazon Web Services, which is a tool we also use. So what we do is we have a report that runs and sends this to a group of people every single day. In the morning, we get this in our inbox, and it looks and says, in TMS yesterday, what new objects were added or what objects had their date changed. And if they were automatically assigning public domain, it triggers that and sends it to us. If it was not assigned, it sends that to us. What this does is allow primarily one of my staff people, I work with the rights and reproductions group and the visual and the photography group. We're staff of 9 people, 3 of which focus more on the rights end of the business. They can review this and look and say, does this all make sense to me? Did the public domain get assigned logically? More importantly, they can kind of look through some of those not assigned tasks and see if maybe those should be pushed over to public domain. Sometimes we have a date range that's 0 because the curator didn't fill that in, but we can look and see that it was from the early European department. Therefore, we know that that object is going to be in the public domain, go into TMS, flip that over and contact the curators about the empty date range fields. So this is a check system for us, but it also shows us some of the automation that's going on so we can keep an eye and make sure that there's not something going on. We also have 3 fields. So besides not assigned and public domain, we've created an additional, we can't call it public domain because public domain is kind of a legal term, but we have 3 curatorial departments that are Indo-Pacific, African, and coins and metals. And in talking with those curators and in bouncing this through legal counsel, the feeling was that the objects in those collections are something that could be grouped in under our open access policy because they're culturally made. They're not necessarily made by an identifiable individual. So we've grouped those 3 departments into a group that we call cultural object. And those objects are, in essence, treated like our public domain works. So if they're post 1923 creation, they get tagged cultural object, they're pushed out available to the website. If they're pre-1923, they get the default public domain because that is officially what we're considering them. So that is one new category that we've added in that not all museums may do. You have to determine where your risk is at on doing that work. One of the things we do that's not automatic, but we certainly work in, is that as part of our accessioning process, the deed of gift forms now all include language about intellectual property information. So while not all the objects are being gifted or acquired directly from the audience, the artist, oftentimes the donor has information about who the artist is or where they may contact them, or potentially, rarely, but potentially may have rights information that they own that they can pass over to the museum. So we gather this information and then we review it to determine how authentic it is, or if we need to get in touch further with that person, or if they had contact information for an artist that we didn't already have. When we're doing the not assigned work, we assign that largely, and this is actually following a model that Deb did, so thank you very much. We have summer interns that we have going through and searching for everything that's not assigned, trolling through. We've already trolled through ARS and Vaga because all of their lists are online and searchable. But we've started looking through and contacting galleries, looking through obituaries, anything we can to find information on who the rights representative might be. Because part of what we're storing in TMS is obviously the object rights type, but we're also storing in using the rights related to constituent, which is where we can list people related to objects, who the rights holder is. What that allows us to do internally is store that contact information, the phone numbers, the addresses, whatnot in there, but everybody can centrally see where that information is. And then when we have known copyright strings, we place that in the copyright field, which is similar to what Deb was doing. If we don't know the copyright and it's not assigned, we just have boilerplate that says copyright artist estate foundation, meaning we don't have something, but we know it's under copyright. That particular field pushes out to our website. So that information is dynamically going out to our website. The object rights type in the upper corner is what tells what size image we can push out to the website. So these charts are basically a visual matrix that are saying if the object is under copyright, it's getting a setting of number 1, which means it's only pushing out a thumbnail, that small screen, 249 pixels on the long dimension. That's roughly following the AAMD guidelines for a thumbnail. We ran into headaches with that, and Dan Dehennehy, who's back there, I know has talked about this, that AAM's definition of a thumbnail is up to 250 pixels by 300. Our legal counsel looked at that and said, that means you can't go to 250, you can only go to 249 because it says up to but not including. And we had a long battle with Vaga for a year about what size images we were putting out. And so we had to fall back to this default of 249 for a thumbnail. If the image is in the public domain, we assign it a larger setting, which is a number 3 on that chart that you see. What that allows is up to a 20 megabyte TIFF file to be downloaded. So we push out to our website a 480 thumbnail to show up online. And then we also have a 20 megabyte TIFF file that users can click and download through a CAPTCHA routine. A newer tool that we're using that we're very happy about, this was written internally by one of our programmers using Adobe Flex. This is called the Media Editor tool. And what you're seeing is on the left window pane is a view into TMS, into that screen you're seeing right there, the pop-up screen. All of the information is there for our rights and reproductions people to look at, but also to edit. So we can go in here and enter information in here, and it's automatically pushing to TMS, so we don't have to go into TMS record by record and do that. On the right side, what you're seeing is a view into our DAM. We use OpenText Media Manager. So we can look and see what images we have, what their settings are. On the right, you see those little step color bars. So this is saying this is an image that's under copyright. So the green little square says, I'm displaying only a thumbnail. So visually, people can look at that very quickly. We can also in here enter in information about credits, caption lines. So if it's a detail of an object, we can put this in. It pushes through to our DAM. Our DAM pushes through to Amazon Web Services, which is what feeds our website. So we now have a tool where we can either pull up an individual accession number and review its information and edit it, or via TMS, we can pull up an object package. So we can do a search in TMS, find all of artist X, and push it through to here to do more bulk editing that in the past we would have to pass through to our programmers and have them run back-end SQL queries. So this tool is newer for us. You can see some of the facets of it here that I have the same drop downs that you saw before. Who entered the information, the copyright string, any restrictions that we have. On the right side, you're seeing the images in our media manager. We keep two sets of files in our DAM for each image. One has the color bars on it that's press ready, and then we have a cropped version that's available for public dissemination on our website and PowerPoint presentations, things like that. And then this is what the assets end up pushing out to the website like. So you see the string of Chuck Close there, that's coming directly from TMS, from the object rights type, pushing through to the website. The size of image you see here is the 480 thumb because we have a permissions in place with Chuck Close, Yale alum, thankfully, who allows us to display larger images. And then similar to what Deb was saying, if you click on that Chuck Close link, it takes us to a page on our website that talks more about how we use our images, how to get in touch with the proper people for rights information, what public domain means, what an orphan work is, what cultural object means. It's kind of a general info page for people. If outside users are interested in getting this image for reproduction use, research use, whatever, if the object's in the public domain, you'll see underneath it'll say public domain, and then you'll have the download presentation size, which is the 1920 PowerPoint size, or download it says full-size image, but that's a 20 megabyte TIFF. We're kind of following the Art Store Images for Academic Publishing model that worked with that, and we felt that served the main clients we're looking for, which is the academic community. If people want a larger file than that 20 megabyte, they just contact our Rights and Reproductions office. We have an online form, and those get sent out electronically via FTP. So they're reviewed for what it is, but we're not holding restrictions on them. If the object's under copyright, we still send the file out to them electronically, but we're sending it saying, this object is under copyright, it's your responsibility to clear it. And much like Deborah said, if we know who the rights holder is, we share that information with them. Or we tell them to go look at Deb's website because we often troll that ourselves.
And vice versa.
The other thing that we have on the website is the ability to push multiple images. So in this particular case, we have 4 views of this teapot, so the user can click through, find the view they want, and then download that particular set of image. We don't have a bulk download and say, give me all 4, but it's a pretty simple process for people to click and download. The reason we put CAPTCHA on the 20 megabyte size was just to reduce the risk of people coming through and scraping out the database and bogging the website down. If the object's in the public domain, we're more than happy to work with people and find ways for them to hook in. We're working with, soon in the process of working with ArtStore, but working with ArtStore for them to be able to get all of our public domain images to push more into their collection, and then they're going to push into DPLA. These tools, which run through Amazon Web Service, are what help us do that, but we also don't want people just to scrape and bog down the website. Similar to Deb, we have different levels of access that we give internal staff to our DAM. So we have different security policies within the DAM that say if you're an editorial publications person, you have access to the publication grade images and more quality files. If you're a conservator, you have access to the conservation images, but editorial doesn't have those, and education doesn't have access to anything but the cropped files that are viewable. On top of that, we have a weekly report that we run out of the DAM that, again, is automatically run, that just gives us a dump out that tells us what assets were downloaded. So in a week, we had 1,100 assets downloaded, what the file name was, the middle number is the unique number within the repository, the date it happened, and what that user's ID was. So each of us have a login to the system, and we have the means to look at that. We're not doing this as much to be a big brother, is to get an idea of who's using the system and how. If we see somewhere where there's a big dump of images, we might get in touch with that person to find out what project they're working on, to be sure there's not something we want to know about or we can help them with. But it's largely just a way for us, one, to show upper level administration that the systems are being used and by whom and how. We have online in our collection, we have about 150,000 objects online. Out of that number, we have 110,000 objects that have images. The rest don't have them, and we'll slowly work through them. Out of those, we have what we consider publication quality, presentation quality images. We have 82,000 images right now available online. Of those, 65,000 are in the public domain. And many of these have multiple images associated with them. So we're pushing out a lot of our images out there. We went open access because we felt like it was a better way to reach out to our community, not have to be dealing with some of what Deb's talking about of, well, we'll give it free to this person, but this person we won't. We decided that financially, while we were making money off internal requests and even external third-party requests, it was better for us to sever all of those, not charge fees, and deal with our assets this way. So that's the overview of what we're doing. It obviously is not only me doing this. We have a programmer who writes a lot of the code for this, a TMS person who helps with a lot of the reporting and querying through here, and obviously numerous people who help facilitate this. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what myself and some of my colleagues at the IMA have, for about the last year or so, been lovingly referring to as our DAM copyright conundrum, which, if nothing else, is at least a lot of fun to say. So to start things off, what is the DAM copyright conundrum? And at its core, this for us has been about finding the balance of the dissemination of information and ensuring the long-term retention of that information with the media files, be it images, video, audio, etc. So the copyright part of the conundrum. At the IMA, our current and updated copyright information is central to the dissemination of our collection images. Our non-exclusive licensing agreements, which you see an excerpt of here, are our main tool to this end. So we do our initial copyright research in the collection, assessing, is a work in the public domain? Is it clearly under copyright? And where it's possible and we've been able to identify either the definitive rights holder or who we hope is maybe the rights holder, we send out the licensing agreement to them with the hope that we will get this returned and all signed and completed. Even if they don't click yes and select yes on all of these, and even if they say no, at least getting it returned and having them say, no, I'm not going to say yes to any of these, but contact us for any future uses, that's a win because we know who to go back to now for any future uses of these images. The IMA does not work with TMS for our CMS. We work with KE-EMu. And when I arrived at the IMA almost 5 years ago, we started really activating the rights module in EMu to centralize all of our rights information and to get this data linked with the artists and their objects. So similar-ish to TMS in what we can record. We're looking at, is it something that's in the public domain? Is it a controlled right? Does the IMA retain the rights? Is it something where it's no known copyright? So we're able to put all of that in, put in the copyright line or any other restrictions. Unfortunately, EMu, as it stands right now, does not have the lovely nature of really being able to track that process. So we have developed in my department this rather scary but very prettily color-coded Excel spreadsheet that allows us to do two things. One, it allows us to share the copyright information with all of our staff members who need access to this information because not everyone has access to our CMS to view the rights module, to be able to see what those restrictions may or may not be on objects. And two, while yes, rights information does push eventually to our website, it's just going to be the copyright line or stating public domain. So even if it's under copyright, it doesn't inform anybody who's looking at that, especially from IMA staff purposes. So do we have a licensing agreement on file? Is it ARS? Like where do we stand with these images and with this artist? So kind of our color coding on this, as you can kind of see across the top there, did a little bit of the traffic light symbol for this to identify for everybody. So ARS, VAGA, DAX, Bridgman copyright, those are red. People know if we want to use these, we're going to have to go back to them and the potential of fees are high. Green means they've signed our licensing agreement. They said yes to everything. Knock your socks off, use as you wish. Yellow, they signed a licensing agreement, but there might be some restrictions, so we need to look at that, really look at what it says in the CMS for what we can or cannot do. We do put those restrictions in the Excel sheet as well for people. White usually just means that it's an artist that we're still doing research on or we're waiting for a licensing agreement to come back. This far right column on the Excel spreadsheet is where we track that status of our research and where we're at. So this has been something that between myself and my assistant, as well as the various interns that we bring in each semester, we're able to all use this column to track and to know where we're at with researching the artists. Have we sent out the licensing agreements? Have they come back? Where are we at with that follow-up? Or are we still just doing general research and trying to narrow down even who to send that agreement to? So while we've struggled with how to get the copyright information to all of our staff, the other area that has been a struggle for consistency has been the caption and credit information and making sure that it's standardized and the same and everybody's using the same formats. So right now, this has meant that for every exhibition, every PR list, every marketing piece, that we, in my department, working with our editor, are putting together Word documents where we have a thumbnail referencing what those approved images are, what's been cleared, and here's the credit line, fully formatted, it's been copy edited, here you go. It works, but it's time consuming. So switching gears a little bit here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the DAM portion of our conundrum. So the IMA, thankfully, is very near the end of almost an 18-month process of implementing a new DAM. This is coming off of 2 previous DAMs that neither of which fully functioned for us. They both had things that they did okay-ish. They had a lot of things that they did not do well. So we've been undertaking this 18-month process where we really thought strategically about what did we want out of a dam, who were the end users to that dam, and how do we bring those end users to the table. So key to this was the creation of an interdepartmental task force, that this was not a decision that was going to be made by technology staff alone. So technology staff were part of that task force, but it included our photography staff, our registrars, myself and Rights and Reproductions. We did bring curators to the table at different times and really brought institutional buy-in from across departments to go, okay, we don't want this just to be IT dictating, here's your new dam, now go figure out how to use it, but really talking to all of the end users and saying, what do you want out of a dam? What do you want it to do? And thinking really strategically about this, which was key to this, in being able to then put together the copyright information coming from the CMS with a functioning dam for us. So in the end, this meant that we made the decision to use Piction. Part of why this has been an 18-month process with Piction is, again, thinking strategically, going, if we'd really wanted to, we could have been up and running, in theory, probably within 4 to 6 months of making the decision to go with Piction. But we stepped back and we went, well, with a dam, you get out of it what you put in. So we had a lot of inconsistencies in our collection imagery. Our photographer's in the audience. She could definitely talk to you about the headache of that. For them, this meant the top row here that you see is what we had in our previous dams. Which image is the one that's been color corrected and is approved for color and is ready to go for publication? I don't know. Do you? It meant for every single request in use, it was having to go back to our photo editor for them to review and identify and make sure that the right file was getting pulled, that it wasn't something that we could just identify, that other people on staff could know by looking at file naming conventions what was approved. So we had a part-time position that we hired that came in and assisted with cleaning up collection images, renaming files, and that's what you see along the bottom here. It's a little hard to see, but it meant that what we created was for every object, a DNG, a TIFF, and a JPEG that all followed a same file naming convention. Prefix starting PS meant photo studio, REG for registration photography, CON for conservation photography. The middle of all of the file names is the accession number to the piece, and then at the end is going to be a VO1, VO2, or a DO1 for a detail. But, and this was crucial for my department, is knowing that any file name that starts PS for Photo Studio and ends in VO1, that is the preferred version 1 that is color corrected, that is good to go for publication. So this was immensely helpful and has drastically changed the way that we're able to process external requests, and for a lot of images has meant that now processing external requests, we don't even have to go back to the photography department. We can go into Piction, download it, send it out to the requester ourselves. So working then with Piction further, we thought really strategically about what information, and spent a good couple months really getting to know the back end of EMu more than I think I ever cared to, and really looking at what fields did we want to push into Piction and how did we want to have those named, and thinking as well, going, there are a lot of staff members who work very closely with EMu and know what these field names mean, but may or may not, but for a lot of other staff that don't work with that, they're not going to know what that means. So it's not immediately translated for them that publish on internet meant that it's available in our online collection, or movement type meant the work is actually on display in the galleries. So changing some of these field names for how they would display within Piction once the information pushed from email. And that's what that looks like here. One of the things we also did for the fields that appeared for the metadata within Piction, and you'll see it with the green arrow there, was one that says high-res available. So this meant for staff looking at this that they can look through the metadata for this piece. If that high-res available says yes, yes, we have the high-res TIFF available, new photography is not going to be required. Otherwise, that field will say no, which could mean if they require a high-res photography for publication, for marketing, for an exhibition use, that we're going to have to request new photography to be done. So one of the areas that I really worked closely with the Piction task force was on making sure that IP side was part of this. So not only that we were pushing the rights information as part of the metadata fields, but also ensuring this rights statement that appears before anyone logs in. So that they understand that within our various user group levels within Piction, that based on what your user group is, what your images you're able to download, that you're maybe restricted from what you have access to as a part of retaining, part of protecting the liability of the institution. So that these images aren't just floating out into the world and we don't know where they've gone, and especially the bigger issue being any works that are under copyright. So as I've alluded to, we have various user groups with various download options. So most of our users are going to have the first three options you see there: a web size version, a size that's already prepped for PowerPoint, and the 5x7 JPEG. Covers uses for most of the institution's staff. So anybody working in social media already has web size versions that they can pull and utilize there. PowerPoint 5x7 JPEGs, usually big enough for all the curatorial PowerPoints that are needed. The last two, the large 3,000 pixels as well as the original assets, that is a much, much smaller group. I actually think that my department might be the only one that has access to that, which is 2 people. And that's so that we can be sending those out and processing those for external requests that come in. And aside from that, we have the admin group, so this is going to be our photographers that are adding the image files into the DAM. And then we have kind of just a basic group that is view only, and they're not able to download anything. The other thing you see here is one nice feature that we really liked was the ability to be able to do a printout from Piction and just print it to Word. So especially curators that are researching different pieces in the collection and maybe thinking about putting together for an exhibition, and they want to have some pictures and maybe be playing around with how might these different works play off one another if we were arranging them in a gallery. They can print them off, and it automatically prints off with some of the basic tombstone information so that we don't have them then just bringing to our desk and laying a stack of pictures down on our desk, and we're going, well, that's great. Thank you for bringing these. Any idea what their accession numbers are and what these pieces are? So we're not having to do that hunting and searching. Just don't give them any ideas to cut those pieces of paper apart. So this very strategic integration of our CMS and our DAM has led to some amazing results for us, even as we're just launching to all staff at this point now. As I already alluded to, it has really, really simplified the amount of time on external requests. Now, my rights and reproduction staff, we can go in to Piction, we can go in and see, oh, yep, we already have full high-res photography of this piece. Boom, I can download it, and it's sent. Didn't even have to get in touch with photography staff. We can also go in and check and go, nope, it's going to require new photography. We can go back to the requester that's contacted us, let them know new photography is going to be required, see if we can work with their time frame, and then we can set the request for new photography within Piction. So it's really streamlined the whole process for us. It's also meant this has been a key element to our new collection pages, which some of you may have seen the news. We just launched on Wednesday. And with that has meant that with these new collection pages that we're able to finally get to a level of open access for the IMA. We've been wanting to do this for almost 3 years, but we needed to get the technical back-end parts in place. We could have done it 3 years ago, but it would have been with a very small number of works, and I really don't think it would have worked all that well. So I think it's better that we waited. In getting ready to move this direction, we also took a strategic look at benchmarking our fee schedule and changing all of that, which should go live on our website probably within the next 2 weeks, and getting that updated. Biggest change to that fee schedule is absolutely no reproduction fees whatsoever now for any scholarly uses. Publications, exhibitions, I don't care what your print run is, nada. Still charging for some commercial uses, but in continuing, as we've always been doing, no charges for personal use for researchers for images. As I said, we now are going to have the high-res downloads from our collection pages. Oh, so pretty. So this has been a long time coming for us. So little glimpse of our new collection pages. You can check these out yourself. It's collection.imamuseum.org. I'll highlight a few things here. So for all of our works now in the collection, underneath the image, there's a link to our image resources page on our website where it's all the information for rights reproductions, our online request form. On the right side here, we have some enlarging and zooming tools, which are made available on all works in the collection except for works represented by ARS and VAGA. I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. John alluded a little bit to the AMD thumbnail guidelines. We're pushing that 250 pixels by kind of a lot. The small thumbnail that you see here, which obviously we allow this to be able to enlarge to full screen and zoom in on. So with the exception of the ARS and VAGA works, all these small thumbnails are put up at a minimum of 600 pixels. Full disclosure, I wrote the AMD policy and I did not write it with the thumbnail number dimensions in there. It's one of the things that really irks me. When AMD published the guidelines, they really felt that they had to give a pixel dimension to the definition of a thumbnail. And we tried to get them to understand that technology is evolving and it's evolving very quickly and a thumbnail is going to change drastically. And we can't put a pixel dimension with it, but they wouldn't budge. And I have been trying unsuccessfully now for almost 4 years to get them to update that. So we'll see. But in the meantime, we are, like I said, putting these up much larger. ARS and VAGA being kind of the exception here. We actually do put that small screen size is up at 600 pixels, but we have restricted, right click is disabled, and when you try to click on the image, you don't have those nice buttons on the side for enlarging and going full screen. Instead, you get this copyright notice that pops up, and we basically are like, sorry folks, go talk to ARS and VAGA. And of course, then we include the link back to our image resources page that if somebody does want to request an image of that work, they can submit the request and we'll process it for them. So a couple next things of this, we have object information, which is identified, as well as the new download images button, which I'm super excited about. So we've been working diligently, my assistant and I, working with our interns over the summer and this fall, on really updating copyright information in the collection, making sure that we're not having just, if works are under copyright, having their copyright notice pushed to the website, but also works that are in the public domain. We have a public domain notification on them that is also pushing to the website. So people can look at this, they know automatically, yes, it's public domain, and they're not guessing. So our image download now, we have a small, when you hit the image download button, we have a small screen that pops up. We ask them first to check what their intended use is, be it personal, scholarly, or commercial. And part of the text that prefaces this is that we're not doing this for us to be able to say yes or no. We're not asking them to create a user account or anything of that nature. This is simply a way for us to track how and where our images are being used. That said, if somebody selects personal, so it's for study, it's for research, hey, I want to make that my screensaver. They hit personal, it immediately pops up a button for them to download the image. We don't ask for any more information from them. Scholarly and commercial, when they select that, they both get this slightly longer form that we ask them to fill out that is just basic information, who they are, where they're from, and a little bit of basic information about their project, be it a publication, an exhibition, perhaps a video that they're doing, and kind of basic information, but again, just so that we can track that bibliographic record and we can keep an eye out for something that we might want a copy of that book for our library. And then once they've filled that out, the download image button in the lower left becomes active. They can download their image right then. So now that we have the lovely open access on our collection pages, we've really been able to continue extending our external partnerships with, ArtStore, Bridgman, Artsy, Google. The list seems as long as my arm at this point. But now having the integration with IMU and Piction, now this information doesn't just live inside IMU of what works have been sent where. Now we're pushing this information from IMU into Piction so that the photography staff can be on the other side and they can do a search and a query within Piction to go, wait, what images have we already sent to ArtStore, or what have we sent to Artsy? And we can quickly update and find what are new images we can send to expand our collections with these places, instead of sitting there going, oh, well, we pulled a new dump and we're going to send you 5,000 images, and oh, whoops, our bad. We didn't realize 1,500 of those are a repeat that we'd already sent you, because we didn't have a really good way to do that search before. Central to this has been expanding things with Google. One place that I absolutely would have really loved to have had Piction in place was when we worked with Google for doing the indoor views, and they came and filmed at the museum. Had we had this rights information at this place and working with Piction then that we do now, it would have been a much simpler process. In turn, it meant, though, that I spent 3 days with Google walking the galleries, going space by space, doing all the filming, and I was walking right behind them, noting every work on the walls at the time and identifying which pieces either were going to need to be blurred in the future or that we would attempt to clear copyright on. In the end, we ended up clearing copyright for a lot of works to be included in Google in that indoor view, because if we hadn't, we would have had an entire floor of our museum not represented in Google, which we didn't feel was best representation of our institution. It worked, we got there, but having had things with IMU and Piction where they're at now, when they came and did this 2 years ago, would have been night and day. It's also meant that we've been able to expand greatly with Artsy and Artsy Education, following similar to the open access we now have on our own website, everything through Artsy Education. You see there, download the image, and again, no cost. It's all the public domain images are made available. And finally, as John already spoke to, so I'm not going to touch on it too much, but it's really allowed us to send a lot more images. We, earlier this year, just sent almost 8,000 images from our collection to ArtStore, and I know we'll have several thousand more to send next spring, but it's going to be a process that is much simpler. We now, with Piction, will be able to do an Excel export from Piction of the metadata into a CSV automatically, instead of what we've been doing for the last several years has been a CSV export from IMU, but it exported into 2 separate CSVs, one with all of the creator and artist information and one with the object information, and we had to manually merge them back together. It was months of work, especially with 8,000 objects. And so to be able to now to automatically pull that from Piction, it's just gonna mean that we can send these images out that much faster to these places. So that has been the DAM Copyright Conundrum at the IMA. Thank you. And I think we've got about 20 minutes for questions. So, and please, if you can, come and use the mic.
I want to thank you guys for a really clear, really practical session. I've been emailing Deb for years about copyright. And it's going well. So one practical question that I wanted to ask you, as far as the 1923 bucket goes, are you using that for only US works or across the board, since it's online publication?
We use it for all works.
We're the same across the board.
That's the answer I've been waiting to hear.
Right.
Not my whole life, but.
but we're not lawyers.
Right.
This is not legal advice, but it's
It's an
Cue the
institutional
disclaimer.
stance
right,
that's been taken.
it's the risk, you have to decide how risk averse you are, and we're not particularly risk averse, and I think this is pretty low risk.
Thank you.
Sure.
My other question is, what for an institution like mine where we have no dedicated rights person, the time that it takes me usually, and the person it falls to, is huge just sort of to track down rights holder information, as you guys know. Do any of you know if there's any sort of sharing happening yet between cultural institutions? Is there a place we can go, or?
Should I talk about the watch file? Well, you probably already know about the watch file, which is writers, artists, and their copyright holders, and it's hosted at UT Austin as well as somebody in England. I can't remember what university. Reading University, maybe?
Yes.
And I talked to them several years ago, and I said, you've got a whole bunch of people doing research on artists, and we've got contact information. We'll share it with you. And I actually sent them a spreadsheet with, all the ones we had to date. And they said, well, do you have permission from these people to release their contact information? I said, no. So they were actually not willing to put it up on their website without specific permission for each one. I actually talked to someone last summer, the guy from Reading University, and I think he's open to something a little bit more loose. So I do think that's something where, as a community, we need to reach out, because it's kind of a pain. We're sharing it, but it's like one email, Right. Right. So, there's a project for us.
Yeah.
If you want to work on it, let me know.
Yeah, and I would say aside from that, I mean, it's a lot of looking at listservs and
Right.
sharing among colleagues, and it's a
Slow.
lot of research of going, oh, they have something by that same artist. Let me get a hold of them and see if they found anything.
And I
So
think the watch file is the logical place. They already have thousands and thousands, so
yeah.
take it from there.
So I have maybe a quick question for all of you. And forgive me if you've already addressed this and I just missed it, but I'm curious in your open access policies if you have any provision or acknowledgement or anything that references the copyright that you hold on the image itself, aside from the intellectual property represented.
The IMA does not claim copyright to its images of artworks in its collection.
The art gallery is the same.
And the Brooklyn Museum is the same. I mean, we put a Creative Commons license, Creative Commons by, the least restrictive. Well, it's not. We still want you to attribute it, but all our 3D stuff, which we would have copyright on, we've released to the wild. And we actually have a couple of artists where we were given copyright when we acquired the stuff, and we've released those too. So
That's great, actually.
Yeah.
So, but you do ask for attribution, though.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
request it, we don't
We-
require it.
right.
Yeah.
It's too hard to track otherwise.
Yeah.
In ours, we just ask for courtesy of the Indianapolis
Yeah.
Museum of Art.
Yeah.
Nice, good.
Everybody join in.
So I have a very specific question for John, and then perhaps a little more general. First, given some of the things that you showed with the TMS integration, in particular, the first email message that you displayed showing what was new to the system, is that something that you got out of TMS directly, or is this something that you developed?
That was something we developed, but we would be more than happy to share the code with anybody.
Everybody.
Everything you saw there is all material created generally in-house, and we freely share that code with people. So just
I
get,
looked at it all, we have TMS as well, and I thought, you don't get that on TMS.
No.
Unless you're like,
no, but it's a simple it truly is a simple back end that our programmer does, who is more than happy to share it. He won't write your own for you, but he'll say, here's how we did it.
we can deal with that. So you talked about having essentially one person that ran TMS, one person that you have as a programming resource.
It does programming across the gallery, so not only for our needs, but for,
I'm trying to get a sense of what you think, and I would pose this to all of you from a technology point of view. How much technology did you have and or need to accomplish what you did?
We needed a fair amount of it. I mean, we made the strategic decision not to do open access a couple years ago when people were like, why hasn't the IMA done this? And it was like, we don't have the technical and the back end in place to do this and to do it well and to do it how we want to do it. So it truly, for the open access we have now and from our collection pages, it's a true result of the last 18 months of work.
So if you could talk about maybe how many people were required to make that happen? Maybe you answer this.
Our core task force was 4 people.
And in our case, we were able to get the DAM software and set up the integration with TMS as part of a larger grant project that we had going on. And actually, all of the programming was done by one person, over a period of weeks and months. But, basically, I talked to him and, said, this is what we need, and he would try something. And so, yeah, I think we're all pretty shoestring.
We're similar.
Yeah.
We ebb and flow. So, just a lot of the tools you saw now are what are going to allow us not to have to rely on the programmers to do a lot of work. But obviously the media editor tool, the last one you saw that's touching the DAM and the TMS, has been probably a year of discussions and 6 months of tinkering and then testing and, using it with a few of our staff to see if it's working and such. And then the programmer is going to go on to some other project that may have nothing to do directly with what we're doing, but we need that type of person on staff that knows the systems, and we consult with the TMS administrator at times as well. I'm not that level of technical. I can tell them what we need and where it needs to go.
I think that from a management point of view, that's kind of the way I would want to pose the question.
Right.
Right. Dan?
I'm not sure, is that working? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Talk loud.
Thank you for doing this. I think this is something we can talk about all day, really. It's a real conundrum for all of us. And an unfortunate irony that, we collect these things to share with the public for multiple reasons, and we're limited by copyright laws. It's a shame that something like this doesn't actually come to a rule in the court. So, but anyway, until that time, it seems like we're all reinventing the wheel in different ways to solve the problem. And you guys know I'm working with the Plus Coalition, and I encourage everybody to look at the schema that's been developed. It's XMP compliant open schema. We're doing that now. We're writing our metadata schema and our DAMs right now. We're pulling in the Plus field because it's very granular and it addresses all of the issues that we encountered. So it's worth looking at. And another thing I wanted to mention was, I think there's a perceived contradiction between licensing images and earning revenue, something that everybody's concerned about, right? Loss of revenue, and open access. Because I learned from someone who's very working in McGraw-Hill and in charge of image procurement, that they have a directive not to use any open access content because of
They want a license.
they want a license.
They want us to sign
So
on.
the audiences are different.
Interesting.
And so I don't think we should feel guilty about using a third-party distributor to license our content. Because there are people, they don't want to go to 50 different museum sites and figure out 50 different ways of downloading content for a book. They want to go one place, get the agreement signed, and be done with it. So
Good point.
we could do both.
The gallery actually recently
Yeah.
pulled out of its third-party relations with Art Resource, Scala, DNP, and not because we don't like those groups. I think they're great at what they do, but we had a conflict of interest that we were giving the same thing away for free that they were charging for, and we were receiving money back for that. And we tried to talk some with them of, are there ways they could discount our images and not cut us a check, cut us no check, but discount them. They weren't willing to entertain that. And I understand because it was a bigger management thing for them to look and say, oh, these are Yale Art Gallery images, therefore they're this percentage lower. But we were concerned we might get called out at some point with somebody who would look and say, wait, I just paid $200 for the same image I could have gotten free for you. And yeah, we're potentially going to lose some people using our images who may not have known the art gallery had that particular image, and they were just looking for a nice image of a boat on the cover of their book, and Art Resource knows, you know, their collections well and have them tagged very well and would have found that. But that was a decision we had to make, just to feel like we were being cleaner about our open access.
Good call.
I don't think this mic is a mic, actually.
I don't think so. It's just fun to make people come up here.
It's sort of fun to talk to, but
There is a-
I'm gonna project this way.
There is a red light on it at the other end, so
It's a direction.
maybe it's just for the recording. Would you like a mic?
I'm James Sheldon from Arts. Nice to see you guys. So I think, and maybe the plus schema you were just referring to as the answer, that the problem that Deb referred to earlier about aggregating contact data for artists, let alone permissions that they give, we usually for a particular situation. I think that's one challenge for all of us, is finding people. And then, but the other one is just what the process of what questions we ask. Because I think in each of what you did, and this is sort of like we did last year, is there's a grid, right? There's 7 questions, and it's sort of like doing TurboTax. I mean, when you fill out your taxes, it's you know, how many children do you have? You know? And you know, what's this line in your pay stub? And so I think we should be able to get, and I probably promised I was going to do this, so I'm sorry if I didn't do it. But we should be able to get together what our 7 or 9 or our 11 questions are. And because then, I mean, back to the question of how we could all do a little less of what we do. Does the plus schema do that?
It does. In fact, it's really well worked out. I suggest everybody look at it. And you know, even Adobe Bridge panels.
But the problem there is that we're talking about a many-to-one relationship. So you've got, you know, 40 images by a particular artist. Yes, you probably want to have some rights information about the image and who created it in the image file, but keeping the contact information for the copyright holder, the artist, in all of those files makes no sense at all, because you know, they change, they update. It needs to be in a repository. And actually, you know, was it you that you said you keep it in the constituents?
We keep it as a
TMS,
constituent record.
which we don't, and we probably should. And I've got to think about that. So
We
you
keep
know, you
ours
have
in
to-
the party records
you have to
and
use
email.
the right tool for the right task.
So
I
we
think.
have artists that have different copyrights on different images.
Yep.
So it would be,
Oh,
what
you
you
mean-
suggested is perfect if it's the same for all of the images of an artist. We have artists that say, we'll let you have, you know,
Right,
film
and-
here,
And that's why you put it in your collections management system, because you've got a record for each object in the collections
Sure,
management
I agree.
system. Right, I think that's really where we need to put it. And then there needs to be some sort of centralized contact information repository that we can all access
Yeah.
somewhere.
I'm Heidi. I just want to add that we do not do it in our collections management system very specifically, because we might have multiple images for one object that have different information, and you can only track object-related level copyright and credit line information in TMS, which is what
Right.
we use at our museum for the object, but
Right.
not for individual media assets. So if there's a short film, or if there's additional assets that go along with an object itself, we track all of that information, and we're currently building a complete rights and permissions workflow in Piction in order to handle
Right.
asset level permissions.
Right, and I agree. Maybe I was a little bit
Yeah.
unclear there, that the object information is in your collections management system, but the image stuff is in your DAMs.
Right, that's how we do
So,
it.
yeah.
So, well, we are about out of time. I think we'll probably have time for one more question. Before we get to that last question, I'm going to make one shameless plug. Hopefully, all of you will also be able to attend our session tomorrow morning on the Rights and Reproductions Handbook for Cultural Institutions that's going to be forthcoming. If not, I encourage you, we've got a bunch of bookmarks up here. You can grab one. But, Lori, I think you have a last question.
I was wondering about decorative, like, especially contemporary decorative arts. Do you make those open access? Or do you draw a line between production models versus prototypes?
We made an institutional sort of bottom line that they're all useful objects, therefore not protected by copyright, unless there's a good reason that they're more sculptural. I mean, we do not look at every chair and say, how sculptural is this chair and what parts of it are copyrightable? So there are times when things come in from famous designers and our decorative arts people they actually already ask for rights clearance. So sometimes we do have copyright on chairs. And I noticed you had a Herman Miller chair as one of your, no, that was yours.
Yeah, that was my, and I was going to say, and that's, we have a very large contemporary design collection. And most of those designers, they want their copyright cleared.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
we haven't jumped to Deb's pool yet. I
Yeah.
have to think about it more.
Nobody's yelled at us yet. You know, it's the risk aversion thing, you know, and if somebody comes to us, we'll say, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
we'd love to sign a license.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone.
So-